This video is about how to use super glue and accelerant. When you first get your super glue bottle, and some of yours may be super large, and I'm sorry for that. I prefer the 1 ounce, but it's really hard to find these. You have to sort of special order these days for some reason. But specifically, this has the kind of tip that you can mount a special tip onto. You are going to get your bottle, and it will be sealed at the top here. So in order to do that, you're going to need to gently lay that on its side, being careful not to shoot super glue everywhere. I often like to pull my cutting mat all the way to the edge of the table and not drop it on the ground like I just did, all the way to the edge of the table so that I can keep this sort of at an angle up like this. But you want to make sure to put a piece of paper to protect your cutting board. Because if you get super glue on it, it's all uneven. And then when you're making your cuts, it's running through the super glue, which is both dulling your blade. It's also messing up your cuts. It's making it so your cutting board can't heal itself. So you never want to be gluing on a cutting board ever. But I want to make sure that I don't pierce right into my table. So I'm going to go ahead and put this at an angle, and I would just go ahead and use some kind of knife to slice through just a first little bit. You'll know if you've not cut off enough, so err on the side of not cutting off enough rather than cutting off too much. Then you're going to take these tips, which I have provided for you in the green room, and you're going to go ahead and press that on there really good. Now you're going to really press. And it will stay. As you get more glue gunked up on it, it will stay easier. But specifically, these bottles are made so that the super glue doesn't stick to it. But I do promise, if you press really hard and you're careful as you go, because at first it may want to sort of separate on you when you're squeezing. But essentially what you can do here, see if you can see this, is you can squeeze. Yeah, you can see that. You can see the super glue coming to the end. This allows you to put it exactly where you want it to go. So just be vigilant when your bottle is fresh and just periodically press down on it and be aware that it may start to separate. And you can gunk up the actual super glue bottle between that and the tip. You'll want to store this upright. Usually it can last quite a while before you have to change tips, as long as you're not getting accelerant directly on the tip. Another thing you can do is sort of flick the tip to get the excess out of the tip if it's been sitting for a while. And usually it will work again and again and again. But I gave you all at least 10 tips. There's more in the green room, so feel free. I have hundreds. I probably have 1,000 of them. I ordered a lot. So I can replenish the backup supply that's in there. So don't worry about it. Use them, be as sparing as your sanity allows. So what does this do? So pretend, I'm sorry for those of you who may not know what a flat is, but think of it as a fake wall that we build and we put in as a set wall. This would be like a representation of a 4x8 flat right here. And we often put these stage jacks to hold the wall up. So it would look like this. So it's kind of this triangular piece that I'm going to glue to the back of this. So what's great about super glue is I can glue this on here in almost no time. If I were to use tacky glue, I would have to sit here and hold it or hope that it balances. So I'm going to show you how quickly this happens. So I've got this super glue tip. I'm going to run a bead all the way down. Looks like that. And I'm going to use my pipette. Everybody has a pipette that they can use that is also in the green room. Usually you want to have this open. And I can fill the pipette. And you want to make sure that it drains down into the little bulb before, otherwise it'll just shoot out. And you can just drop a drop or two on here. And 1, 2, 3. Now it's already hardened on there. I flicked it a little hard. But I just have to get it on the other side too, so it's in here. See, it's already glued on there, nice and solid. Now, if I sit this here, it's gonna maybe wanna fall forward. And so the cheapest model building supply that exists is American currency, the penny. So I can literally go on here, put a little bead, I can put the penny on there, and I can go ahead and do a little not water, but accelerant droplet in there. It's already glued on there. See how it's already glued? Staying on there, not coming off. So a couple notes. This bottle smells real bad. So there's a couple things you're going to want to do. Part of the reason I like the pipette is because I can make sure that I screw this right back on there as soon as I'm done with it, because that minimizes the amount of fumes. This stuff is marginally carcinogenic. So you want to make sure that I've gotten it on my fingers my entire life, but try and minimize that as much as possible. The other thing you want to be aware of is if you have a huge glob, like a really big glob of super glue, and you try and accelerate that, a little puff of white smoke might come off. You don't want to breathe that. That is basically cyanide. So if you see a puff of smoke, you want to make sure you book it away from it. And you also, whenever you're using super glue and accelerant, you want to make sure that you are doing this in a well-ventilated space. So have like your windows open if you're doing it in your dorm room, or if you're going to do it somewhere, try and have a more open space. All scenic designers use this stuff. It is very common. I don't want to scare you, but I want to be realistic about the fact that it is not a health food. So be careful. Make sure you wash your hands after you're working with it. If you don't have a pipette, if you are working remotely or something, the way to handle this is to glue your little bottle to some kind of piece of cardboard or whatever. So I have this little piece of cardboard here. I am gonna just go ahead and do the circumference of the bottom of the bottle. And I'm gonna just go ahead and put it on there and then stick it on there. So I'm just gonna wait for a second. And now it's stuck on here. So this helps me not knock it over by accident. The bigger of a footprint you have, the better within reason. This is usually a pretty good size to have you not knock it over. Then you can use, I have a little piece of Bristol board here, or a little piece of wood, or you can rip down a piece of mat board or illustration board. And you don't want it to be too big, so like you really only want it to stick out a little bit, because the longer this is, the easier it is to knock over the thing. So I might chop this sucker down a little bit, like right here. Again, cutting on cutting board, gluing on pieces of paper. And hopefully not pieces of paper on the cutting board, because sometimes the super glue will go through the paper to your cutting board, and that's a whole sad mess. So I could keep this little thing in here, and when I decide to glue something to this, I could do a little bead right here, put it on there. Let me see yeah, you can see that. I could take my little stick and I could dab it just with a little bit of glue, and bam, now it's solid, right? So that is working with super glue. Again, you don't need to be sparing with tips. They will get clogged up eventually, like this one. This is far past the point of just being able to flick the end. You can see that I use this little chopsticks holder for my pipette because it keeps it at a nice angle without anything leaking out. Obviously, that is a personal choice. I do prefer the pipette method over the stick method, but I know that like Todd Rosenthal, who is a Tony Award-winning scenic designer, uses the stick method, right? So if he does it, it is useful sometimes to have a pin or needle. Usually this hole is even too small for this pin, but it might help you if inside of this tube it gets a little clogged. That rarely happens to me. And that really only happens when your super glue starts to get super old and most of your super glue is super new. So that's the basics of using super glue and accelerant. There's a lot of benefits. I totally understand if you are intimidated by it, but it is awesome.